Welcome to the Prolific Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, Isaac, co-host Stan, and we're excited to dive in today. Stan, what are we talking about?
We're going to talk about fitness myths or misconceptions, things that we've encountered within our time in the fitness industry, things that young trainers are probably encountering right now and may be on the fence about if it's a myth or not. But yeah, we want to be able to spread this to our members, something that you guys may have questions about as well.
Perfect. All right. So I guess to dive in, when looking at what is a misconception or a myth, like there's some things that are pretty blatantly obvious, right? Like there's the big one that I'm sure everyone in the health and fitness space hears often is like carbs make me fat. And like there's pretty big myths that are easy to dispel.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
So it goes into what are some of the more nuanced, maybe misconceptions that we see that aren't talked about as often, or maybe not viewed immediately off the bat as like a misconception. And so I would like to start with one that I think is pretty prevalent now that social media is as big as it is. And right off the bat, I think it's, every fitness influencer has the right idea.
Right.
I think that's a misconception that a lot of people don't think about when they're looking on social media for like, oh, what should I be doing for my next workout? What should I be eating for my nutrition? What should my diet be like? Well, I'm just going to go to Instagram and look at people who are in better shape than me,
Right,
and see what they're talking about. So without giving too many details about like people or something, when was a time that came up for you as a coach trying to help a client who may have just been doing whatever they saw their favorite influencer doing on Instagram?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess one of the biggest ones that I've seen, because a lot of people say a lot of things that may have a lot of truth in it, but there may be a lot of myth in it as well. So like the whole, lifting weights will make me manly, and I've encountered that a lot working with females in terms of from a powerlifting standpoint. And in reality, like a lot of them don't eat enough to really bulk that much, right? So like you'll see that from pages of people who honestly like don't hold authority in that within that space, may even be brand new to the space, but it kind of came in with like a decent body and maybe some decent strength. So people kind of look at them as an authority. And with their follower count going up, it gives them the appearance of having authority within the space, even if they've only been really truly lifting for like 6 months. Slap trainer in there who's going to check them on.
Yeah. And you bring up a good point too, because then you look on the flip side of that. And a lot of times women will be, at least in my experience, I don't want to lift heavy because I'm going to look bulky or look manly. And they then compare themselves to powerlifting women or bodybuilding women who have been doing it for decades.
Yeah.
And have worked like the majority effort of their life to getting to that point. And it's like, sorry, Susan, like your weightlifting for 6 months isn't going to get you the same physique that this lady has had after decades of training, eating as much as she could, lifting hard, lifting heavy, going to the gym daily, and probably taking some hormones and other things on top of that to get to look that way. Like, I don't think people understand that's not how the process really works, right?
Yeah, and that's another thing too. So like, enhanced or not, like as long as someone's putting in work, you gotta look at it from that standpoint. So let's say I get someone who's brand new to strength training in general. Maybe they came from maybe they were a cardio buddy before, right? So let's say I've got someone I've been training for 5 years. They started to bulk a little bit, haven't tapped into using enhancers, but they definitely put on a little bit of size. Well, it's just not going to happen overnight. It's tapping into, all right, this is my goal for right now. If your goal isn't to to bulk up like that, then why would you be eating like you're trying to bulk? You still do strength training with, with you being on a deficit. It's probably, probably not going to be great. Like your strength's probably not going to go up a whole lot, but you're not eating, you're not overeating. You're not trying to eat to the point to where you're like, all right, I'm definitely way over the calories that I output, and I'm bringing in more calories than that. I'm definitely not way over that. And like, let's be honest, like a lot of the people that they're comparing to aren't necessarily the natural athletes. They're going to be like the enhanced athletes, and a lot of those enhanced athletes have their routines down. They have their schedules down that they run their enhancers and their food. So it's going to be one of those things where you really have to have that nailed down. And if you don't have it nailed down, you're just kind of like putting this unrealistic image in your head that it's not going to happen overnight. And if it does happen overnight, then you're not being completely honest with us.
Yep. And check this out. This is.
Ooh.
Oh, I like that. No, so it's a really good point to bring up. And while we're on the, I guess, context of women, and I know guys do this too, right? We look at social media and compare ourselves, but I think women are more vocal about it without realizing they are.
Right.
In terms of, there's so often I'll have a girl be like, I really want to get a bigger butt or nicer legs, something along those lines. It's okay. So how's your training? And they'll be, well, I'll lay down at night to go to bed and I'll get on Instagram and I'll go to so-and-so's page because she's always got really great glute workouts. And I'll, take a note of what I want to do for tomorrow's workout.
Right.
So I'll just go through her page. And so I'll go look at that influencer and it's like every other day is a brand new, never before seen glute exercise that's like supposed to be the key to getting greater glutes. But again, after my time in the industry, one thing that like research shows us time and time again is that consistency is key. And what we don't see is that influencer does that one exercise for the thumbnail that will get more views because she is getting paid by sponsors who pay her based on the amount of views that she gets. So she can't show the consistency. It would take away her paycheck, right? Nothing against influencers who do that. Good on you, get your money, right? But at the same time, we have to understand that influencer might do 2 sets of that exercise to film it, make sure it's done right, and then goes on to do their normal workout that they've done consistently for the past 5 years.
100%.
Because it's that normal workout that you don't see on their social media that has actually gotten the results.
Yep.
And it's not saying that this crazy awesome exercise that you're seeing is bad. It probably isn't. But that's not the thing that you're watching that's getting that person the results. That's something that's just cool that they saw, that they put together, that can get more views and get other women to watch and say, oh, I'm going to do that. And it's new, it's novel. So when you try it, of course you're going to feel it. Part of that's the placebo effect. And part of that probably is an okay glute workout. But that kind of, first new thing effect causes a lot of the mob effect, right? Where oh, this is great. So I'm going to, talk about oh, I saw this glute exercise that so-and-so did. And then someone else is going to do that. And then once a certain amount of women are raving about that exercise, every other woman wants to be a part of it. Again, goes for guys too with a lot of other topics, but women are more outspoken about it within the fitness space that I've experienced. So it's a lot more of hey, that's great. Now understand that's probably not what they're doing all the time. There's probably staple, basics that they do all the time. And these are just kind of sprinkled in on top.
Yeah.
And then with that too, it's if that exercise is great, cool, keep it. But now that should be one of your staples that you do every week.
Right.
For, 6, 8, 12 weeks before you change it up again. Don't be changing it every time you go to the gym, because it might be the thing that's causing you not to get the results you want.
Absolutely. And to caveat off of that too, if you do want some variance there, do a variation. So for example, if we're doing if I'm teaching deadlifts, right? and I want to maintain the same type of consistency. But that person, one of the reasons you may change is because like you're starting to be more prone to injury, right? But you still want to keep that movement in. Just do a variation of it that puts your body in a more advantageous position. If you are doing something like a glute bridge, there's like 70,000 ways to do a glute bridge, right? Make sure you keep doing the glute bridges, but don't try to change them up to some crazy extravagant when you don't need to. You know what I mean? Like I think that's the biggest problem is like, wow, that's brand new. I've never seen it done. Mm-hmm. You have seen it done. You just haven't seen it done that way. And it's presented to you as if it's something that's brand new. It's thought-provoking because you're like, man, I think I've seen something like this, but I'm not for sure. You don't have to keep changing it up. Consistency is the way to go. When it comes down to you wanting to grow, wanting to get stronger, consistency is the key. But there is room for you to have variations in there. Because if you don't have the variations, yes, it will get boring for you if you're not overly, like, let's say, if you are dedicated, it still gets boring. But you know what it takes to get there. So you're going to keep going. You're going to keep pounding the road to get there. But the variations help if you do want a little bit of difference there. And I think that's one of the things that should be important to be stated. The variations won't change a lot. It's going to keep that consistency that you need, but don't go in every week and say, all right, I'm going to do a tempo squat. All right, this week I'm going to do a barbell squat. Okay, this week I'm going to come in and do a belt squat. You need to block it off. You need to have it set up to where all right, for at least 3 to 4 weeks in a row, I'm going to go in and do a barbell squat, barring, something that could injure me. And at that point, then you would go to the regression of that so that you can teach yourself so that your body can refigure out this is the position that I need to be put in. And from that positioning, I feel good about it. So let me progress back into that.
All right. So you're saying that you shouldn't try and learn Mandarin and then your very next language lesson try and learn French.
Right.
You should instead maybe try and, learn Mandarin and then go back and review what the letters are.
Yeah.
And figure out, oh, okay, now I'm getting this is making more sense.
Exactly.
And maybe after a few weeks you can actually start to read something, right?
Right.
I like that. And again, this isn't to single out women, like guys do this too. And I think it's important to also state, like, wanting change in your workouts isn't a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's not. Because at the end of the day, all that matters is that you are staying healthy, that you are exercising. So if you're someone who wants the changes, that is great. You can do that. We can do that.
Yeah.
Just understand what that means for the framework of your fitness. If you have a specific goal that you want to get to in 12 weeks, the best way to make sure that you obtain that goal is by sticking to the basics and keeping it simple. As soon as you start bringing in all these different variations and changes, you push out that date just a little bit each time because you're not giving your body that stability of these are the set things that I'm going to do, and I'm going to allow my body to actually adapt to these things. And I think we had this idea, and this is, I guess, where guys can come into play. A lot of guys read the, bodybuilding encyclopedia, the Arnold, the old school Arnold kind of book on bodybuilding. And it's like you have to shock the muscle. You have to do all these different things. And so that was like, that's still a terminology I hear all the time. Oh, you got to shock the muscle. You got to confuse it. You have to do it. It's like, no. Your body needs to adapt. That's how periodization works. And the key to muscle growth or strength gain or whatever it is periodization. It might not always be upping the weight, it might not always be periodizing weight, but it's at least periodizing stimulus or like that effort that you're putting into the weight that you are using. So I think that's an important thing to note. And you also see this a lot on the nutrition side, right? Like, oh, well, I saw this influencer say that I need to do this style of elimination diet so that I'm not as bloated all the time. Say, okay, or you could just take a green supplement and see if that helps in like a week, because it probably will, because you're probably just fiber deficient or micronutrient deficient.
Right.
And whenever you eliminate these things, you're still hungry. So you increase eating other things that actually help you past bowel movements, right? So see this a lot with nutrition, and it's nothing against the influencer, but it's just understanding like what are the basics, and those basics never just go away.
Right. Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, because it's almost like you think about like how does a football player get better at football, right? Like they always talk about like, oh, I'm in great shape, but once they get to training camp, they're so far out of shape because they haven't been playing ball, right? It's the same principles here. I mean, there's an entire training methodology based off of what you want to do specifically, right? It's called the SAID principle, and we'll go into that on another day, but it specifically targets what you want to work on. And it allows for variations, but it also wants you to stick with what has gotten you to the ball game in the first place. Learn the basics before, you know what I mean? Let's learn how to ride a bike with training wheels. You know what I mean? Like that's the biggest thing to me. Let's learn how to ride that with training wheels, and let's slowly take the training wheels off. And this isn't to like say, hey, our members need hand holding, because that's not the key. The key here is I want you to understand why your body is moving the way it's moving before I start adding, pulling you in this direction to the left, pulling you in this direction to the right. I want you to understand where your center of gravity is, where your center of mass is for this entire exercise. Once you get that down, then we can do all the other stuff. Because I think that's the main point. As trainers, it's really hard sometimes for us to just stay the course and stay the course and stay the course. But then we want to throw in, 6 different things that really do make sense in our head, but a lot of times may not make sense for every client. Like if our clients have a good solid base already, all right, let's throw a few monkey wrenches in there so they're actually challenged. But if they're brand new, let's stick to the basics. Let's get them good at the basics first, so that way we can build a solid foundation. It's just like the techniques we teach within squat and deadlift, where it's building a house. Well, I'm not buying a house that's built on a slab, because I mean there's a lot of them out there, but if you ever look at them, what happens when you walk in the house? A lot of times they're slow. House on a solid foundation, you can tell when that foundation is cracked, because you'll walk in there, you'll go down to the basement, you'll see the crack. You want to build that solid foundation. Once we build that solid foundation, we can come back and reinforce it a few times, and then we can start building the other levels. And that's why I feel the way I feel about this time.
Yep. And Kobe, I forget how many, like the actual number it was, but he would shoot so many free throws, like he would make so many free throws every day.
Yeah.
For like his entire career. He was one of the most prolific pro basketball players in history. Any basketball player in the NBA, minus maybe Shaq, should be able to shoot a free throw like it's no big deal. Honestly, anybody at the highest level of college basketball should be expected to make free throws every time.
Yeah.
No big deal. And I say this as a non-basketball player who can't shoot at all.
Yeah.
But
because I was about to come at you for that.
Yeah.
I would appreciate that.
Kobe shot so many free throws. And it's not because he needed to work at free throws.
Yeah.
It's because he was constantly perfecting his shot.
Absolutely.
How he shot from the free throw line, how he released the ball, everything. It made sense for whenever he was, coming out of the post or hitting it from the outside. Like it was the same fundamentals, because he was ingraining his shot, not just the free throw.
Right.
But the free throw was a way he could control the setting, the environment, to get the reps in consistently. He was shooting those free throws.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, whenever he was in a game and the game was on the line, it was a free throw to win it, he was going to nail it. There was nothing. It was like practice to him. Yeah. Now, to relate this to, I guess, training and muscle growth, is that your body still, like your muscles need that foundation to be constantly set and re-ingrained, or else they don't have any stimulus to periodize off of. We're constantly changing that stimulus. And now there's a bunch of different ways we can change that stimulus, but it's also understanding that a lot of it comes down to fundamentals. I saw this lady try and do a kind of like I guess you could say it's a clamshell variation, where she was laying on a bench, So she was like balancing on this bench in the fetal position with a Smith machine bar on her knees, and so she was like pressing and opening her hips like a clamshell,
right,
with one knee, laying on the bench and the other knee pushing the bar on the Smith machine up. And I had seen the post on social media, and I was like, it's kind of ridiculous. And I saw the lady trying to do it and was like falling all over the place, like falling off the bench, trying to stay, stable. The Smith machine kept like shutting itself. So she was, jamming the machine. And it was at the base level, it's just a clamshell with a mini band. You can just put a mini band on, lay on the ground, and get the exact same stimulus on the muscle that you're trying to do with this quote unquote cool new exercise.
Right.
You can do that same exercise in a way that makes sense. That's super simple. It just doesn't look good on Instagram.
Right.
But it works the muscle the exact same way, except now you can actually focus on the movement, actually engage the right muscles and get more out of it instead of trying to not fall off a bench and hurt yourself. So again, like we need, and I say need with an understanding that I rarely talk in absolutes. Like I always tell our members this, and my personal like online clients, like I rarely talk in absolutes, but there's a few things that I am very confident in. And one of those being like the body needs the basic foundations constantly in that programming. It doesn't matter what you're going for. Like a hinge, a press, a squat, and a couple like stability or unilateral movements are kind of foundational, right?
Absolutely.
How we do those might vary, but those things are foundational. And if we can do those in a simple way, we will constantly get results. As soon as we start changing that to be more advanced, might be good for some people.
Yeah, depending on what they're doing.
But we know for a fact that if we stick with the basics, we will get results.
Yes.
If we get more advanced, we start playing with that bet of, is this actually going to improve this person or not? Or
Right.
are we taking it too far out of that realm to where they're seeing very minimal gains?
Well, and that's a good point. So like if we on the level of like when we look at people, we assess people. All right. That's why we ask, hey, what's your goal? Once they come in. Let's say we're taking someone who just have this goal. Hey, I just want to be healthy for the rest of my life. I don't need to take them through things that aren't within their wheelhouse. Once we start getting overcomplicated, once we overcomplicate anything with someone, I feel as if it kind of takes that base and it makes it seem not as important. So once they come back to that base, they may feel like, man, I'm not as strong at my base lifts or my base exercises as I once was. It happened with me. So like once I started getting away from, initially I was just powerlifting, and it took away a lot of the other things I used to be able to do because I was incredibly flexible prior to me starting to powerlift. I got injured. All I did, I squat like 4 times a week, which was overkill. And then I came back to it, and then I was like, man, I want to be agile again. So I still lifted, but I added in those other things. And I think that's why I'm like, hey, if someone's overall goal is this, we can sprinkle in some of those other things. Like, I like training people with lateral movements. I love training people with lateral movements. I love training people with bands and chains and all that cool stuff, but it has to have a reason behind why I'm doing that. A lot of times with bands and chains, we're using that so that we can help someone minimize a deficiency that they have within that exercise. But then, like you said there, I don't know, I want to see this video now. I want to see the Smith machine video. It sounds like it's overkill. It's almost like the guy that ties the bench around his waist and does pull-ups with it instead of tying weights. So yeah, I think if there's a reason for it specifically, if you're training an athlete and their sport is a north and south sport and in some instances, the east and west sport, I think it's necessary to train them like that. But also, if it's just someone who wants to get stronger, maybe be more flexible, maybe be more healthy, then we should stick with the basics when it comes down to that.
Yeah.
You want to segue to our next myth?
Well, actually, I think we'll finish this episode with this myth, and we'll go into another myth for the next episode.
Okay.
Because I think there's still one thought here that we can finish on, and it's that understanding that social media and reality are very different.
Absolutely.
And once you start understanding, like if you're a business owner, you understand that social media can be a business tool or a consumer tool. And sometimes we don't understand when we're being consumers of the tool to someone else's business. Because it's really, it can be used for both, but it is like binary. Like it's a consumer tool or a business tool. And sometimes that business is nonprofit. Sometimes that business is just someone who loves to give value, but they're still giving value with the understanding that they're going to get views, get, clout, or get engagement as the payment, as the reward for that.
Right.
So they're using it as a business. They might not monetize it in the way of money, but they're monetizing it in the way of attention. And so you are either the business using the tool or the consumer consuming the tool that the business is putting out. And so with these like fitness influencers per se, they are using it as a business tool. And sometimes we lose sight of that as just the consumers who are consuming it and thinking, oh, this is great, I'm going to do this. And so as an in-person coach, and I work with a lot of in-person coaches, so this is a fear that I see quite often on their end, is like they want to change things up because if they keep it too simple, their people will leave. Their clients will leave because it's like it gets boring. It's like, okay, to an extent, and it's because they're comparing themselves to all the vast changes of things on social media. But the difference is when you're in person, you can actually talk to that person. You can talk to your members, talk to your clients, have an actual personal understanding of their needs, be invested in their life and their goals, what's going on. And if you stick to the basics, you get them results. And you know what sells more than like crazy new, off the wall stuff? Results.
Absolutely.
If you can bring your people results and show that the basics and fundamentals work, they'll stay. And if they leave, which you and I have both seen in our own personal, coaching businesses, they leave because they want to try this new thing. Oftentimes they come back because the new thing it's like the grass isn't always greener on the other side. Absolutely. Sometimes you realize that your grass was really fresh and what you saw on the other side was one patch. And it was surrounded by dirt and mud and quicksand and all these other things that you didn't want. And so then you come back to the other pasture. And that's where, like, I firmly believe, yes, there's a time and place for like cool, crazy things, as long as we always keep the fundamentals as a baseline within that. So we might have, members do crazy, like Tyler, for example. We're always having him do some crazy stuff because that's just his personality. He loves it and he wants to do all those challenges. But at the same time, we're still having him do the fundamental basic movements throughout his workout. And we sprinkle on these other things just to keep him engaged and fun and happy. But he still understands that the basics are there for a reason. He actually is enjoying those basics. Yeah. And so there is a time and place for this, but understand, like, as trainers, so if you're a trainer listening to this, results sell. And you actually caring about your members and caring about your clients and understand that they're not just a dollar sign, but they're actual people with lives and they're unique and they bring their own level of life to your business, that will keep them coming back. Because it's kind of funny. Once you quit caring about the money comes. Yeah. Once you quit caring about, trying to get your clients to pay and actually just start caring about your clients, right, you get more clients, right? Yeah. And so when it comes to that, understand, like, quit comparing to social media, because social media isn't going to get results. Basics and fundamentals and caring about your people get results.
Absolutely. And I'll say one thing there too. I think that it's important in how you present things to people. I think that that's incredibly important too, because that can factor in if they'll stay around or not as well. I'm not attacking anyone, because this is how I used to present. When I first started training, I used to just, the information would be in my head and the way I would deliver it would be so monotone, or it would just be so like harsh of a delivery that it wouldn't be fun for people. Even if they saw I had other clients that were getting results, that wasn't their thing. They were there for the experience as well as the fact that like, I feel like I have a friend in my trainer, right? They're going to cap my ass when it comes down to it. But at the same time, I know that when we're attacking a goal, it's not just my goal, it's their goal too. And we're sharing that. And I'm going to share in their successes, I'm going to share in their failures, but I'm working my tail off to make sure that they don't fail. So I think there's a lot within the presentation. And as a trainer, we have to go in and look at it from their perspective. If I was being coached by me, would I respond to 1, 2, 3, 4? Probably not. I probably would be like, man, this is kind of ridiculous. I want someone who's going to push me along, but also have that understanding that, hey, like, if I'm communicating something to you, like, hey, like, I'm kind of nagging right here, communicate that with me. All right, let's see what we can do here. Let's see what modifications we can make, so that way we can keep moving it along. And then the other thing that I would say is, whenever, like, for us, we have a ton of people in almost around the clock here, up from the early morning going into the afternoon. So the nice thing about that is that the environment is already set. The hard part from a training perspective is making sure that I give that same level of excitement to each person, because each person is on maybe like a different level. So whenever I'm delivering to somebody that's brand new, I don't want it to come off as like harsh or whatever, especially if they don't know my personality. But I also don't want to give them my level 10 yet of excitement, because you know what I mean, like that I can overstimulate the whole situation for them while they're learning how to do something. Whereas like we get Tyler up in here, or even Matt, I get Matt up in here, like I get pretty hyped with those two. Like Spencer, I get hyped with him too. Whereas we get brand new people, I'll give them that level of excitement, but I also want them to understand, like, I'm not giving you fake excitement because you're brand new. I'm giving you this excitement because you actually, something told you to come in here.
That you showed up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You show up, I'm going to show up. And I think that's where, if I was the client, that's what I want from my coach. So that's what I'm going to deliver with them.
Yeah, 100%. All right. So episode, I guess this is what, like 2?
Yeah, this is episode 2
is really coming down to, don't trust everything you see on social media, because at the end of the day, it's a tool, and you might be being used by the person who's using it as a tool.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is, the fundamentals are always going to be the fundamentals. Like, the basics are the basics, whether you're trying to build strength, get lean or toned, quote unquote, get a good, like a better physique, longevity, just being healthy. Like, the fundamentals and the basics are there for a reason. So hope you guys had a good time listening to this. These are always great conversations. So expect another myth for the next episode. We'll see you next time.
Yes, sir.